Well, it's true. They were robbers. They were no good. They were thieves that came in the night and stole all the crops. They stole all the animals. They stole anything of any value that anybody managed to get, and then they ran away. They were famous for their chariots. They were famous for their horses. They were the sea people who had come from someplace mysterious, someplace way up probably in Greece or Macedonia. They swept through Egypt and took over Egypt even for a while. And they were building cities along the Mediterranean coast. And the Israelites knew them as Philistines. And they were scared of them. They were so scared of them that they occasionally had heroes rise up, like Samson, to fight off the Philistines, to try to rally the people. People like Gideon, to rally the people to try to stand up for their own selves, their farms and their villages. But the people didn't think that was enough. And they demanded that they would have a king. We need a king so we can have an army, like all the big countries have. And they went to their prophet Samuel. We've been talking about Samuel for a couple of weeks, and said, we want a king. Samuel says, oh, you don't want a king. You know what? A king will take away your sons and put them in the army. The king will take away your money and put it in his treasury. The king will do whatever the king wants to do, and you'll spend all your time supporting the king. Where the people say, we want a king. We want a king. Okay, okay. God told him, pick this guy. He went and picked Saul as the king. Saul wasn't the best king, but he was a brave soldier, and he knew good tactics. He knew what army tactics were in those days. Army tactics were always, you try to fight the enemy when you have the most soldiers. And if you don't have the most soldiers, you try to fight the enemy on better ground than they have. You try to get the high ground. Why do you want to get the high ground? Because you're shooting arrows and throwing spears and throwing rocks and rolling rocks, and they go better downhill than uphill. If you're trying to throw something, you can throw it a lot farther downhill than you can uphill. And so the smart thinking of the time was get the high ground. And so they ran and they looked, and well, Israel is full of hills and full of rocks for that matter, and it has big deep valleys where the rain rushes through in the springtime and forms these big gullies between the hills. So Saul and the Israelites ran and got the highest hill they could find, and they stood on the hill and they said, wait, go ahead, come at us, you Philistines. The Philistines, unfortunately, had read the same tactic book. They went on the next hill over, and they got on the high ground themselves. They said, no, no, we're not fighting on that low ground. We're not going uphill at you. You come and fight us. And they got their own hill. And they sat on their hill and waited for the Israelites to come at them. And the Israelites didn't come because they weren't stupid. They didn't want to run down the valley and then up the hill at a stronger enemy. They stayed on their own hill. And they called each other names. You're a loser. Oh yeah? Well, you're a fraidy cat. I'm not afraid of you. Oh yeah? Why don't you come over here and fight me then? Why don't you come over here and fight me? It went on like this for months. Because everybody knew that if you set up for battle and then you just withdrew, that you were admitting a defeat. You were a loser. And nobody wanted to be a loser. Nobody wanted to be embarrassed. Nobody wanted to seem to run away. But you had a standoff and nobody did anything. And the tactic book didn't tell them what to do next. So everybody was sitting on their own hill waiting for the other guys to try to attack, and nobody did. The Philistines had an idea. We will suggest one-on-one combat. We'll have a champion go fight their champion. Why did they have this idea? Because they had the biggest guy ever. They had the Shaquille O'Neal of warriors. They had the LeBron James of spear carriers. And they had this guy named Samson. He may not have been very bright. Notice his spear carrier, his shield carrier, does all his talking for him. His spear and shield carrier says, our champion will fight you. And this is what he says. Send out your best warriors, we'll have a fight, and whoever wins, wins the war. Nobody wanted to fight him. He was much bigger than they were. He was stronger. He had better armor. He had a giant spear. He had a giant sword. His armor alone weighed hundreds of pounds, it seemed like. Who wanted to fight that? Nobody, except David. And David went out, and you know what happened. David used his slingshot, hit him right between the eyes, and won the battle. What's that got to do with us? What it has to do with us is that David's example shows us what to do when we ourselves are facing giants in our own lives. We face all kinds of things that we are afraid of. People are afraid to face the biggest tests that are coming up at school. People are afraid of what's happening to our country. People are afraid of what's happening in our businesses. What will we do when our competitors are stronger than us and faster than us and have more money than us? People are worried in our churches. We don't have enough money. We're not paying our bills well enough. We don't have enough volunteers. We don't have enough people. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? What are we going to do? And all the normal tactic books tell you what you're supposed to do. You should study a long time for your test. You should get more money and better products than your competitors. Smarter employees, a better sales location. Your church should just have more people with more generous pocketbooks. People should just do more. People should just be better. There you go, fixed. But sometimes when the tactic book doesn't seem to work, we don't know what to do. What can we learn from David that keeps us from being paralyzed with fear? First thing that David shows us is that you do best when you make sure that you are not so focused on the strength of your enemy or your opponent or the problem ahead of you that you are paralyzed with fear. Think about the task instead. David does not say, I will beat the giant. He says, I will fight the giant. He refuses to be paralyzed with fear. He focuses on the task at hand. Second, David does not stick with what isn't working. He adapts to the circumstances. The thing that would have been a total failure would be for David to put on King Saul's armor and go up and try to fight Samson, or fight Goliath, face to face, sword to sword, spear to spear. When your sword is 5 pounds and the other guy's sword is 20 pounds, your sword is going to break. When your spear is the typical 6 or 7 feet long and your opponent's spear is twice as long, he can stick you before you can stick him. When he has all kinds of armor and you don't, it's harder to win a sword fight. David does not stick with traditional tactics. He attacks at a distance because he looks for the strength he has that matches the weakness in what he is facing. But not just a weakness inherent in what he is facing. Goliath is a giant. Goliath has armor. Goliath, therefore, cannot move fast. So the way you go after Goliath is from a distance. That's why a slingshot is a perfect weapon. He can be close enough to come in when he succeeds, but he does not have to face him at arm's length. We need to adapt our tactics and be willing to try new things in school, in work, in church. Be willing to try things we haven't done before. That's why we tried this silent auction strawberry festival this week. We had never done it before. We had no idea whether it was going to work or whether anybody would come. We did our very best with something new and innovative, and it was great. We had a great time. It might not have worked, but it was worth the effort. It was worth the attempt. And the same is true in the other things that we do. So we try something new. We might not even like it at first. Other people might not respond at first. It might not work at all. But if you are unwilling to try new things, you get stuck in a tactic that leaves you sitting on one hill with the other guy on the other hill and nothing happening. He's willing to adapt. Third and most important, not only is he willing to look to the task instead of his fear, not only is he willing to try new things, David is trusting in God. That's important because it is very easy to forget in the midst of things that we're really afraid of. We can call out, God, God, help me, I'm in trouble. But will we really trust that God will help us? There are times that it seems like a foolish thing to do. There are times when it seems like everything is stacked against us. You know what it's like to suffer from long illnesses that don't seem to go away. You know what it's like to mourn the loss of loved ones that have left a hole in our hearts that will not seem to heal. You know what it's like to struggle for weeks or even years with a project that seems to go nowhere. But if we trust in God, we know that God will care for us even in our failures, even in our suffering, even in our struggling. And we believe that there is more to life than what's going on right now. Do we believe that? If we believe that, we can trust in the one who loves us and won't let go of us. Because this is not the end. This is not all there is. God loves us forever and never lets go of us. And that gives us hope even when we are facing giant with giant God's armor. Amen.